So what's been said is that for everything there is an Onah, a season, a right time for every intention under heaven. It's amazing, we have far more intentions than successes. I always have good intentions, it doesn't mean I actually follow through. So here we recognise seasons as the major divisions of our year. Mainly because the Western world is based on the Greek-Roman system of calendars and seasons and celebrations. These major divisions of our year are based on yearly periodic changes in the weather. In the temperate and polar regions, 4 seasons are generally recognised: spring, summer, autumn and winter. And I think we can all say now that we've suddenly entered into autumn. But in some tropical and subtropical regions, it's actually more common to speak of the rainy season or the wet or monsoon season versus the dry season. They have 2 seasons a year. It's either wet or it's dry. In Israel, they love the wet season, and Lake Kinneret fills up again. And it's not below the black line. Why? Because the amount of precipitation may vary more dramatically than the average temperature. But in fact, in Torah, only 2 seasons are outlined. Summer is the time of sun, and winter is the time of rain. So in Torah, it's summer, winter, that's it. The whole 4-season concept is actually a Roman concept, and it's based on the sun movements or solstices. So like a lot of other things we follow the Roman and Greek methods of doing things. But the Torah system is 2, summer, winter. Even Hebrew time, like the dates and days, are also different. A Hebrew hour is divided into 1,080 chlachim, or parts. And each of those parts is divided into 76 moments. Anybody got a watch with those on? And because of all these differences in times and seasons and everything else, confusion reigns. Also, the Jewish day is from dusk to dusk. But the Roman day, that our present system is based on, actually started at dawn, or the 6th hour. And that makes it very interesting. It's another fact that exposes the myth of the rising on Sunday theory. Torah clearly states that the women arrived at the tomb while it was still dark. Well, if it was still dark, it wasn't dawn. And if it wasn't dawn, then it wasn't Sunday. Not even on the Roman calendar. So many references are also misunderstood that are outlined in Torah because the 3 hourly watches were different in both systems. The Romans had 4 watches, so when you hear there it was the hour of the first watch, second, they have 4. The Jewish people had 3. So consequently, most of this is written by Jews to Jews, and it's talking about 3 watches. And people get confused because they're actually working on the 4 Roman watches. So time-wise, there can be some confusion. Time, in fact, is a completely different concept in Hebrew thinking. Actions in the Hebrew verb are determined by the content being completed and not the time taken. Does that make sense? It's the content being completed that is important, not the amount of time taken to complete it. And the past is understood as that which is already here. before man, whereas the future is understood as something coming after him and not yet experienced. Therefore, past and future, two dimensions of time, don't exist in Jewish thinking. The light is only called day, and darkness is only called night. Why? Because Yahweh only notes the event itself and not how long it takes. Yet another aspect of this that we need to realise is that in analysing the Hebrew we find something very interesting. Creation was carried out in a very orderly manner, with 6 major stages of development and creation. Not one of these 6 creative days are defined or measured by time. Again, brings in a lot of confusion. They're not measured by time. They're actually 6 stages of completion. And the translations only come out as the first day, and the second day, etc., up to day 6. This is an error in the translation from Hebrew, because the Hebrew says, and the evening took place, and the morning took place, day 1. Genesis 1:5. And Hebrew expresses the words, the first day, as Hayom Harishon. But in Torah, it simply says Yom Echad, day 1. Or stage 1, to be accurate. In Torah, there is plainly no 24-hour time-based definition used for any of the days mentioned in Bereshit or Genesis. All it describes is stages or events. Western Greek thinking, that we used to, of course, is based on cause and effect. But Jewish thinking is Torah-based and actually focuses on the effect and the cause. Not cause and effect and cause. Totally the opposite. The Western mindset proposes, I think, therefore I am. But in Hebrew, that would be, I am, therefore I think. You see the difference? As was outlined in Israel's answer to Yahweh at Mount Sinai. We shall do, then we shall obey. In Western thinking it will be, we shall obey and then we'll do. No, it says we'll do and then we'll obey. Experience produces thinking and understanding, not the opposite. Human life is a succession of events and seasons. It's not some chronological countdown. A series of relationships with one another and Abba is made possible by choosing them and walking with them, and then and only then can we understand and really get to know them fully, not the other way around. We would say we'll research, we'll get to know them, we'll find out all about them, and then maybe we'll walk with them. No, we walk with them, we learn to trust them, and that's how we find out about them. You can't possibly find out about somebody unless you walk with them and spend time with them. How can you understand the steps of a journey till you've completed them? As the Jewish saying goes, actions speak louder than words. So people actually need to stop procrastinating and analysing everything to death. In the Western world, we analyse everything to death. That's why nothing gets done. That's why no decisions are made. How can you analyse something you don't know? How can you analyse something you haven't experienced? That's what makes people fearful, because they don't know. And although we don't know all the facts of the journey, we put our trust in the person taking us on the journey and guiding us through it. No, I don't know the steps of the journey. I don't know where the journey is going to take me. But I trust the guide who's taking me on the journey. So forget Greenwich Mean Time and focus on moon time. Why? Because the whole Jewish world was focused on the moon, not the sun. The Romans focused on the sun, they worshipped it. Our focus, our timepiece was the moon. The first sliver of the moon of every month signifies the first day of the month. So the first sliver of the moon that you see, the first bit of light, that's the first day of the month. I don't care what it says on the calendar. A full moon signifies the middle of the month. And at the end, where the moon basically almost disappears, that's the end of the month. All moed, or events or festivals, or appointed times, are based on that. Just as each week is based on the days before and the days after Shabbat. There are no names for the days before and after Shabbat. There are just numbers. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 6. The only day in the Jewish calendar that's got a name is Shabbat. And when you talk about it, you say, oh, it's 2 days before Shabbat. Or it's 3 days after Shabbat. That's how you describe it. Each day is measured by prayer times. Starting with Shacharit, which is morning, the morning prayer time between dawn and 3 hours afterwards. Then you have the Mincha, or afternoon prayer, between early afternoon and sunset, and the Ma'ariv, between sunset and midnight. And then you have the festivals. The first 4 of the 7, Chukat Olam, or perpetual Moedim of Pesach, Matzah, barley harvest and Shavuot defines the summer. And the last 3 of Shofar, Yom Kippur and Sukkot define winter. Of course, we're the opposite here. But these 7 festivals are the ones that all Jewish men were, 3 of them, all Jewish men were required to go up to Jerusalem for. It was part of their calendar. It was part of the things that happened every year. All of these things defined the calendar movements through the year. But of course, all of these aren't measured in time. They're measured in events. And you don't observe them, you participate in them. Everything is about action, not about thinking about things. So you participate in events. You don't think of them in terms of time. You think of them in terms of this event is going to happen. I will participate in it. I don't just observe it. Observing it as the general that's 10 miles away from the battle while he's shouting orders for all these people to sacrifice themselves and go over the top. Go with one eye. Moshe Dayan led his men. He didn't drive them. He didn't send signals. He led them. He wouldn't send them somewhere he wasn't willing to go. He went and they followed him because he was a leader. Leaders lead. They don't drive. He was absolutely horrified when he went to Sandhurst on a training exercise for senior officers from around the world. And he came back shaking his head. He said, they know nothing. So you don't just observe them, you participate in them. You immerse yourself in them. Just like Shabbat. You don't observe Shabbat, you participate in Shabbat and you immerse yourself in it. And you do it as if it was the first time each time. Again, that's the difference in thinking. You aren't just doing something that's historical. Every time you celebrate it, every time you do it, it's like it's the first time. You dedicate yourself like it's the first time. You immerse yourself in it like it's the first time. You treat it like the first time every time.
Then it never gets old and worn out.
No. You celebrate it. But you celebrate it by being involved in it and part of it. It's a time of rededication. People say, oh, it's just a festival. It's not a festival. Every single time it's a time of rededication. It's a time of refreshing. It's a time of allowing yourself to be fully refreshed and fully restored. And as I've said many times before, what is the greatest of these festivals? Shabbat. It's the most important of all the festivals through the year. Shabbat, each week. And here we come to that old chestnut that we read about not observing special days and months and seasons and years. That's why we mustn't observe Shabbat instead of Sunday, or different festivals instead of the ones written here. Because it says in there that you mustn't observe special days, months, seasons and years. Is that correct? It's not what it's saying. You have to read it, the context before it and after it, to understand what it's saying. It rears its head on a regular basis, therefore it must be addressed, and we will. The bottom line is that, like most modern teaching, it's been taken out of context. And the way they do that is by not including the key parts at the beginning and the end about being former slaves to the elemental spirits and the redemption of those in subjection to legalism. Both Jew and Gentile. It's talking to both. And because it says that we've been redeemed, that makes us sons and daughters and no longer slaves. Then comes the key part. So how is it that you turn back to those weak and miserable elemental spirits? That's what it's talking about. It's not talking about Torah days, seasons, events and everything else. It's talking about turning back to the old pagan ways. Turning back to those elemental spirits that you were subjected to and slaves to. And he says, do you want to enslave yourselves to them once more? And them, of course, being the pagan days, the pagan months, the pagan seasons, and the pagan years. Which even in Yeshua's time was the Roman and Greek. So I love it that Shaul feels the same way we do at times when he says, I fear my work among you has been wasted. And have I now become your enemy because I tell you the truth? And he says that because they're being lured back into the world's ways and the world's traditions, and they're actually rejecting Abba's designated times. It's the exact opposite of the way it's taught.
Yeah.
When he talks about turning back to the elemental spirits, he's not talking about Torah, is he?
No.
So any day, any season, any year isn't an option, no matter how hard they try. I know, let's make one up. Let's call it Christmas. I know, Easter. Let's call it that. You do realise, of course, that Christmas is Christ's Mass. It wasn't celebrated for about 500 or 600 years, and it was in Constantinople was the first time some Catholic priest decided that to have a special commemoration and called it Christ Mass. It was just one of the masses that they held. Of course, the systems put in place to regulate time on the fourth stage of completion, or as it says in there, the fourth day, The sun, the moon and the planets will be removed at the end of time. I know often I keep talking about the end of time. People keep looking at me blank like, what are you talking about? This is why I'm laying it out for you. The things that he put in place to measure time at the beginning are the things that will be removed at the end of time. He states it in Torah. Time will run out. Time was designed as a vehicle for man, not for him. This is why he lives in eternity and we live in time. There was a start, there'll be an end. Why will the sun, the moon, the planets be removed at the end of time? Because they won't be needed anymore. Why? Because the old heaven and the old earth will have passed away. People have still got this strange idea that at the end times all these things are going to happen and suddenly this massive great big New Jerusalem is going to be plonked down on the old earth. The old earth isn't big enough. Only the new earth and the new heaven will be able to take the kind of dimensions. When you read the dimensions in there, because I know I've talked to engineers, it's miles high, it's miles wide, it's huge. Only the new creation of a new heaven and new earth will be able to cope with the massive dimensions of the New Jerusalem. And Yahweh's Shekinah glory will take the place of the sun, the moon and the planets in this timeless, eternal new system where night no longer exists. Of course night no longer exists because the sun's been taken away, which shines on the moon, which shines its light on the earth. They won't be there anymore. There'll be no more clocks, no more watches. Yippee! There'll be no being late or on time. The concept will be irrelevant. You can't be on time, you can't be late if there's no time. The measurement won't be there. You know, you take 7 years getting to the meeting. Oh, I'm right on time. All you'll do is enjoy Abba's presence and celebrate an endless Shabbat. This will be the season of seasons, the event of events, a celebration of the old orders passing along with every tear from our eyes, death, mourning and pain, all permanently removed. Sound good? So basically Yahweh's bottom line is, make the most of this season. What we're living in right now is just a season. Seasons come, seasons go. I'd say we're probably in the fourth season, or the second season, probably about 10 or 5 to midnight. Make the most of the season that you're in. It won't last forever. Make the most of the time we have left. It's running out. Share the truth contained in Torah, because our ultimate goal is to encourage as many as possible to also have their names recorded in the Lamb's Book of Life. Why? Because it says in there, if your name's not in the Lamb's Book of Life, you won't be coming into the New Jerusalem. And if their names are recorded in the Lamb's Book of Life, it qualifies them to be set free and to join us in this coming eternal, timeless kingdom. So Shalom, Nitzchi Echad, timeless one. Shalom.